Ahoy and come aboard as we set sail through my imagination. In this video, you'll discover how I created my award-winning image, Siren Sorrow. So as always, Siren Sorrow came about because I was experimenting with techniques. I'm very technique driven, so my images come out of whatever technique I'm trying to learn at the time. And in this instance, I wanted to create an image that was HDR. HDR works perfectly on like rust and things like that. So knowing that I was going to create an HDR image, I immediately thought of this shipwreck that is about 40 minutes from my home. It's called the Gayanda shipwreck. So it was originally the HMQS Gayanda that was ran aground to serve as a breakwater structure, but she was originally used by the Maritime Defence Force and later the Royal Australian Navy. So I believe that was prior to 1921, and then in the 50s she served as a sand and gravel barge, and then in 1958 was ran aground. So it's been there a very long time. Now I shot this, I think, in around 2015, I'm going to say. And since then, this top has collapsed, it's fallen off, and it's really down to about this level now in terms of decay. So it seemed to decay. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of decay in the time because now it's just a rusty skeleton. But that last bit seemed to happen really quickly, so there's very little left of it now. I'm glad I shot this when I did, and actually it was probably a bit dangerous considering how precarious this top was and that it shortly fell off. Regardless, I chose it as a location because I knew it would make a perfect rusty structure to create some HDR with. However, I'd only ever walked past it before, never kind of tried to photograph it. So when I got there with my camera gear, I realized that you actually can't get down to the beach. It's, obviously a safety issue. So I am a little bit ashamed to say this is the one time that I broke the rules. I ignored the trespassing and danger signs and climbed down a large wall of rocks to get there. I had my mother with me. She loves to make sure that I'm safe on my shoot. So she was still standing up at the top, just throwing things down to me that I needed. And it was quite late in the afternoon. So the light was, changing very quickly. The tides were coming in. And the area is quite public. So there were lots of afternoon walkers walking around above me on the track and a busy construction site to the right. So if I'd moved my camera even one more centimetre to the right, you would have been able to see it. So I was feeling very rushed and very self-conscious. But this is all part of the fun of doing this work. You've got to live a little sometimes. So this image was actually created not only as HDR, but as a panorama. So for every shot I took, I had to shoot it 3 times with the 3 different HDR settings, and then move my camera for the next shot in the panorama, take 3 more shots, move it, take 3 more shots. And if you've shot HDR, you'll know that one of those shots is usually 20 to 30 seconds. So this took a lot of time considering the circumstances I was working under. So let me just quickly show you those panorama shots beforehand. So that was the main shot. Then I moved it to the left, even further to the left, then up. Obviously didn't move it to the right because of that construction site. And so this is kind of what the merge looked like. I did that in Lightroom first. And so that was a little bit of pre-work I did. So you'll see these little bits of shots coming together into this image here. And then there was something weird with that sand. I just darkened it down because it wasn't fitting the rest of the scene. Then I merged them all and sort of took it into Camera Raw and did a little bit of changes to it. So I brought out some more color, rotated it a little bit. So that's the image I'm now working with. Next, I brought in the tail. It was an orange tail at the time. It is a stock image that I purchased. Don't usually like to use stock, but I did not have any pictures of pretty fishtails handy. So that is the image as it was. And actually, I even think it actually started off as blue. So there you go. This is what it came with. So it actually came with a little bit of body. I couldn't use that body because it wasn't in the right position. So I actually had to get rid of that by masking it away, change the color to orange. Not sure why. I'll change it again later on. Then I lightened up that little bit of the tail, lightened up the edge here because obviously light would be hitting her from above, and then darkened everything down just to make it look more uniform. Changed it to pink and then darkened it down even more. Then this is a little bit of a shadow that I popped in for when her body pops in. So here she is. That was what the original image looked like of me in my track pants and like a tiny sports bra thing with some, that's actually wool that I found at a shop that I thought looked like seaweed wrapped around my neck, and wearing a blonde wig. So you can imagine how I was feeling in the circumstances I described before. I've obviously masked away the bits I didn't want, gave her an arm back, that must be from a different shot, and brightened it up to make it fit everything else. Then I made that blue bit of wool green because, you know, if it's seaweed, it's going to be green. Started working with the overall colour, so I made it pinker. I won't go through what each of these are doing, but you'll kind of see. So I brought in some light, darkened everything else down, brought up more light across the whole image, made it more contrasty. I took some of that contrast out of the boat to be a little bit mystical, sort of, I don't want to say foggy, but just take some of that punch out of it. I just thought it would look too dramatic. And that's, I guess, from the HDR, it brought in so much detail into this image. So what I should explain, actually, because I forgot to mention it, is that because every shot was a panorama and an HDR, I had to combine those 3 shots into the HDR version first. And then I took the resulting HDR of each bit of that panorama and combined those together. So it's quite, I mean, it's probably a very big file size. Darkened everything down. Then I took away some darkness from the bottom here and just kind of brought some more detail into everything else. I cleaned up this spike here because it wasn't really fitting in properly. I'm not quite sure how that happened. And I popped in some birds, so they came from a different scene entirely, something I shot overseas, obviously. We don't have kind of cool buildings like that in Australia, really. And brought them in with a blend mode multiply, and then just did some toning to get rid of whatever sky was left behind. Then I have brought in a colour fill. So it is a black colour fill, almost. And I have masked that over everything but the boat, just to make that sky much more dramatic. Put it on an overlay, brought down the opacity. I've put some shadow in beside the boat, I think because I added in some fake light before, so I had to create fake shadow. And I've done the same for her, just darkened her up a little bit, made her a little bit brighter and more orange. And then we're just doing some more toning, so I won't go through each of these, but you'll be able to see what they're doing. And they are making some very dramatic changes, as you can see. Then I added some textures over top. So actually what I did for this one here in the sky is I took a picture I'd taken of some water and I used that in the sky just to give it a little bit of a more magical feel. And that ties everything together a little bit better. And that is the final image. The one thing that's kind of bothered me about this image is the little seam that came around the boat, and that looks like bad masking, but it's actually part of the HDR. It just gives it that really super crispness. So I kind of wish I'd spent a little bit more time masking around that. But I'm pretty sure this was the first image of mine that ever won an award. I think it won $100 at a local show. I was also a finalist in some contemporary art awards. So it's actually done okay. And I also entered it into a lot of local art awards because I thought this shipwreck is a very notable feature in the local area. But what I didn't know is that everyone paints this ship, so they see so many images of it in the local art awards that it didn't even get a look in. So I thought that was interesting. So what is this image about? So basically, you know, it's kind of obvious, but really what I was thinking when I created it is of a siren who basically sang a ship to ground. You know, sirens sing songs that attract sailors to, I don't know, do they eat them? What do sirens do with them? The story is that she, you know, sang her song, brought the ship to ground, and then for whatever reason, she later came to regret her actions. So that's the overall story I wanted to tell, but on a deeper level, the image is kind of about shame and regret, and how even superheroes and fairy tale characters make those mistakes because no good story comes without challenges and redemption. So, you know, I guess I was trying to say that if you're dealing with those emotions, they will ultimately become good stories, and they're just part of being alive, you know, making mistakes and learning. Also, just playing with HDR because that's how my images come into being. So, me matey, to avoid living with the regret of poor choices, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can keep discovering all the cool creative ways to use your photography. Farewell until next time, and happy creating.